Welcome to the Predictive World series brought to you by SalesChoice, a company that specializes in ending revenue uncertainty for human advantage. I'm your host, Jen Yim, the Director of Product and Marketing at SalesChoice, where we bring three offerings to market. There's Sales Insights, which helps sales professionals meet their sales plans with predictive analytics and guided insights. Mood Insights, which helps bridge the distance between frontline employees and company leaders, powered by AI. And our third offering is AI and data science as a service, designing, building, and maintaining AI models. Over the years, we've been hosting numerous experts and thought leaders in the fields of AI and revenue growth, building a trove of podcasts and webinars and white papers and more. And I direct you to saleschoice.com/resources to discover that. So today I have Dave Latshaw of BioPhy. Welcome and pleasure to meet you. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Of course, happy to be here. So, just by way of background, studied computational biophysics and artificial intelligence for my PhD. More specifically, looked at neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. From there, I went to Johnson and Johnson, where I was for 6 years, and I was in a group that was broadly responsible for creating artificial intelligence programs for the company. I was fortunate enough to be able to work all the way from the very early stages of drug discovery and development, all the way up through commercial, in developing those types of programs for the company, of which some of them are still there today, saving the company hundreds of millions of dollars. So very happy to have that legacy at the company. But what ended up happening was I went to go do my MBA at Wharton and really wanted to continue the work that I was doing for artificial intelligence in the drug development space. And BioPhy was born out of that idea. I met my co-founder, Stephen Chung, there, who was thinking about the problem of drug development from the perspective of someone who does asset allocation. And between my background and his background in finance, we started the company in 2020. So we've been around today for about 4 years.
Wow, you have amazing credentials in AI and pharma. That's incredible. Could you tell us a bit about
Mhm.
BioPhy specifically?
Of course. So, what we wanted to do was focus on the drug development space. One of the things I like to do is differentiate that between discovery and development. So, a lot of times when people hear artificial intelligence for pharmaceutical companies, they really think about drug discovery, where you're trying to come up with novel molecules from scratch. So, using artificial intelligence to do that in the R&D space. What we're more interested in is drug development. And the way that I differentiate this is once you've discovered the molecule and you've identified it and you want to figure out what to do. There are a lot of different downstream problems that need to be solved once you've done that. Just because you have a molecule that you believe is going to work does not mean that it's going to make it all the way to regulatory approval and into the hands of patients. So solving problems like how do you allocate resources to these research and development programs most optimally? How do you structure clinical trials in order to maximize your probability of, generating that evidence and efficacy in the patient populations that you want? How do you support this from a regulatory perspective? Those are all the things that BioPhy is really focused on. And that's, the space that we think provides a lot of value in the near term. Whereas the full value of artificial intelligence in drug discovery, I believe, is still a few years out.
Wow, it's almost like you have to deal with two models of in my head, I'm imagining like AI and working through the language like a computer science aspect of scripting, but also the physical almost side of that with chemistry and molecules. I'm just going to turn it over to Dr. Cindy Gordon to start the conversation.
Hey, Dave, thank you very much, and hope that you're enjoying your day in Boston. It looks like it's a nice sunny day. It's coming through the curtain. When I was listening to you describe the company's value proposition, I immediately thought you're really an ERP enablement structure because you're really trying to deal with the work processes and bring process simplification across that drug discovery journey, and bringing a capability to companies to purchase that infrastructure. So I guess at the end of the day, I know you started the company because you'd met your founder. You also had had the itch. Is there a little bit more to that story? Family heritage, or you come from an entrepreneurial background? I'm always curious about the courageous roots of an entrepreneur, but maybe there's some other thoughts there, because it usually germinates, from other mentors as well.
It's a very interesting question. Like I mentioned before I started BioPhy, I was at Johnson and Johnson, and I was doing my MBA, and there was this confluence of factors that really made me take a hard look at what I was doing with my career. So this was squarely within when the pandemic had started. So at that time, there was a period where I had just had my second daughter. I was at Johnson and Johnson. We were dealing with the pandemic. I was doing my MBA. My wife has a very demanding job, works full time as well, and I have an older daughter. And I had toyed around with the idea of starting BioPhy and realized that, look, there's only so many things that you can do in your life at the same time and do them well. So something had to go, and it certainly wasn't going to be my family. So, I had to think about, from a career perspective, what was it that really mattered to me? And I took some time to reflect on what I had done at Johnson and Johnson, and what really mattered the most to me and what was most impactful. And for me, it was one, the people that I got to work with in order to, accomplish our goals. It was two, being able to come up with the ideas organically from scratch and grow something. And then three, being close to the impact. And I realized that although I had successfully done that to some extent within Johnson and Johnson, I was on a career path that was more akin to an executive, being further away from that kind of design and kind of like organic creation. And I wanted to focus on the things where I felt that I was most effective and I could feel the most impact. And I realized that starting BioPhy would be a way to do that. So that was really a major motivating force for me. I think there's sprinklings of entrepreneurial activity in my family, but it's certainly not a driving force. I'm definitely the only one that's gone down this path to this extent. But I do have a very supportive family, and they've always encouraged me to try to pursue whatever I thought would be the best fit for me. So here we are.
Well, thank you. I knew there was some additional context, and I think one of the key skills of great CEOs is the fact that they reflect. And it sounds like you did a fair bit of that in making this decision. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you gave us some context clearly on the value proposition of what you do, but I'd like a little bit more context on the market, the competitive landscape. How big is this problem, right? In terms of having that process visualization through the different stages of the drug development to commercialization. You're entering a market that is a very rich market, right? It's an expensive, process. And so I got to believe there's got to be a lot of broken segmentation issues for you to try and bring this asset end-to-end value chain together. But I'd love your context on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. So I'll take a step back for a moment and just frame, one of the larger kind of backdrop problems that everybody in this industry is always trying to solve to some extent, which is, why is it so expensive to bring a drug to market? There's a lot of factors that go into that. And one of our kind of fundamental theses is that one of the ways to do that is better capital allocation and decision making. So the question of, how do you properly decide whether or not to go and pursue the development of a particular drug is really fundamental to what continues development and what doesn't. Now, given that probably only 5% of drugs actually make it from the early stages of clinical trials all the way through regulatory approval, there's a lot of room for improvement there. That means that 95% of these drugs have a team, have a company that has some level of conviction that they're trying to put this, through clinical trials and get it to ultimate approval. But 95% of them don't make it. So somewhere in this chain, there's decision making that, I'd characterize as an opportunity to improve. So if we can move that needle by using these quantitative metrics on whether the biology works, whether the clinical trials will work, and make those decisions ahead of time so that people can choose to allocate less resources to a program or not do it at all. Ultimately, if you think about how that would apply to the industry as a whole, you can really bring down the cost of bringing a drug to market because you'll no longer be pursuing these programs that are doomed to fail. You'll be able to allocate more capital to the ones that have the promise or at least have the downstream impact that you're looking for. And it really allows you to improve the decision making of the industry as a whole to a level that completely changes the way that that it would operate. So that's really kind of the big overarching goal of what we're after and the way that we'd like to accomplish that. So as that looks and getting to that long-term goal of where we want to make that impact, there's more practical implementations of how to use the technology today in order to kind of chip away at that goal. So it really breaks down into a few major use cases that have emerged and are very differentiated based on what we do. More specifically, with larger pharmaceutical companies, portfolio and pipeline management and competitive intelligence is one of the bigger use cases. Their position is unique because they are managing so many programs at the same time. And if you really think about it, it's no different in some regards than your own investment portfolio of stocks and bonds. Every one of these drugs has a risk and reward profile as it pertains to what the company's objectives are. And you can solve that problem quantitatively. And that's something that's very attractive to the larger pharmaceutical companies. And by extension, if you kind of take the lens away from the internal company and apply it to the rest of the industry, you have a very robust competitive intelligence tool as well. So those are major focus areas for large pharmaceutical companies. We also work with early stage startups that have drugs that they're trying to bring to market. And the way that we do that is basically characterize the biological feasibility of those things and basically allow them to highlight their strengths to potentially competitive molecules so that they can differentiate within the marketplace. So, in terms of the identifying the right opportunities, that's how we pursue it. And then on the support functions, those quality, regulatory, and operations pieces, we have a language system that supports those individual functions and basically acts as an accelerant to their daily workflows. And the more interesting use cases sort of evolve from that, where this becomes something that actually sits in the background and can perform tasks that would normally be very burdensome for an organization to pursue. The best example here is if you have changes in regulatory policy or law that have downstream impacts as to the way that you need to operate your company, how do those changes actually propagate and make their way into standard operating procedure documents within the company? If you're massive, like a huge pharmaceutical company, this is a very hard problem to solve because you've got all these documents locked away. Nobody knows exactly what's in them unless they happen to be looking at them. But if you have a system that can sit in the background and basically tell you what the changes are, where the gaps are, you can stay compliant in a very real-time manner as opposed to having a large long-term initiative just to react to changes in those policies. So those are the ways that we're typically addressing the opportunities, and they're, as far as we're aware, those are very differentiated within the space.
So Dave, being a former venture capitalist, you're taking on a lot with 3 use cases. So which is your primary one?
Yeah. So the biggest use case right now is definitely the portfolio management perspective for the larger pharmaceutical companies. One of the nice things about this is the use cases are driven by 2 major pieces of technology. So in order for us to adapt our 2 major pieces of technology to a new use case, the incremental build is quite small. The data and the way that we've built it doesn't require a significant amount of work in order to create that solution. So that's why we've been able to adapt it to seemingly very differentiated use cases. But in reality, it's using a lot of the same data to customize it to the end user's needs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard not to. I've got this visual picture now of how this is all operating. Probably don't have it totally right. So I know you're applying AI. Can you walk us through where AI is being used? Or is it mainly, machine learning techniques with predictive analytics? Are you, because you mentioned the use case of the regulatory environment, are you using advanced algorithms for search? So just maybe a bit of a spin on how foundational your architecture is for AI under everything. You're just
Yeah.
curious because that's obviously a value proposition that needs different skills too, depending on what you
Yeah,
do.
happy to. So I'll highlight three different components of the system. They're basically the biological predictions, the clinical predictions, and then the generative system that sits back there as well. So on the biological side of things, we take I'd call it a composite geometric deep learning approach. So we use knowledge graphs and geometric deep learning to do the biological characterization, but in order to populate the information within the graph, there's other models that are basically sitting and doing characterization, being it chemical structure and composition, being it biological sequences for proteins or what have you, that are really feeding into that larger model. So it's a hierarchical in that sense. When it comes to the clinical side of things, we have a system that we actually filed a patent for that we created in-house to solve the problem for clinical trials. It's interesting because pieces of that problem, the drug and biology piece is a very big data problem, but clinical trials are actually a small zero-shot problem. You have maybe only 450,000 clinical trials historically, which means that you don't have a very large observation set to be able to utilize, some large deep learning architecture in order to do your predictions. You have to be much more creative with it, and that necessitates taking some Bayesian approaches to solving that problem. So that's a major driver for the clinical side of things. And then on the generative side, we've taken a an approach where one, we've fine-tuned our own models that are privy to regulatory, biomedical, quality, and operational data, and blended that with uh, basically our own uh, set of rules and kind of checkpoints in the background. One of the things that's very fundamental to that architecture is avoiding hallucinations. It's very, very, very important to the end users that one, they're not being given false information. Two, they have transparency to the source data itself so that they can, be compliant with internal policies. And then three, they have the ability to kind of track and summarize the information that they're utilizing. So there's a whole lot of background architecture that goes into supporting the generative model itself and really creating that more comprehensive architecture.
Dave, I don't know if you've seen that, given you've got a couple of daughters and I assume they're young, you probably recall that movie Happy Feet. So just imagine me in
Yes.
my office, my feet are just so happy because what you've done is you've also articulated the variance of the different use cases and disciplines in AI and knowing the precise approach that's required to get the optimal outcome. And we often see, AI being applied in a singularity perspective because of the skills that might be only resident in the team, and a particular hammer and sees a nail and applies the same kind of emotion. So I just want to just really recognize the thoughtfulness in the dialogue and how important it is for our listeners to know that there are many disciplines in AI. It's not a one trick pony, so to speak. But thank you for sharing that, Dave, and the clarity that you went through. Now, you're at the point where obviously you're innovating. I don't know if there's any customer stories that you're comfortable to share, any major press releases, but where are you right now in sort of your growth cycle, and any stories you can share on the customer's value proposition would be great to hear.
Of course. I think there's probably two favorites that I have right now. One being on the generative side of things. So the best way to articulate this one is, and I may be dating myself a little bit here, but I don't know if anybody remembers the Pepsi challenge where you do the blind taste test of Coke and Pepsi, and it was designed to ideally have people have one outcome because there was a superior cola. So oftentimes, what organizations do nowadays, because there's a lot of different offerings within the generative space, is they do a lot of A/B testing. They will ask the same questions to systems and see what their preferences are. So we were fortunate enough to be put to the test against a larger pharmaceutical company's internal generative system by some of their own internal functions within the regulatory space. And really happy to say that they ended up selecting our solution over what they had built internally, simply because it was superior and solved all of the major challenges that made them either not be able to use the system because it wasn't detailed enough for their individual job functions, or it had limitations which they had not addressed internally. And I think that really highlights the power of these more niche specific models. There's something to be said for the really large, sort of grandiose generalist models, but by and large, the more specific data sets, and really knowing the challenges and problems that you're solving for the end user, end up creating a better user experience that ends up being superior for the application. So that one I really like a lot, and I think highlights the value of being able to do that. The other would be, there's a company that we're working with, which is a seed stage biotech that has raised a pretty tremendous funding round, which they have not publicly announced yet, but will do so in 3 months. And we partnered with them early on to do some characterization of their drug, which they're developing for multiple oncology indications. And we were able to do an analysis that highlighted the major biological drivers of the way that their drug works. And the really interesting part of it was we highlighted 7 drivers. 5 of them we were able to validate with published data and basically say, yes, our system said this. There's been primary research published that also validates this. But we also had 2 things that there was no data in the public sphere about, that the system highlighted. The really great part of it was that when we talked to the physician scientist who had been doing this work on this particular target for 20 years, what he said was, that's really interesting that you highlighted those other 2 things, because I've never published on them, but they're right. I have the data that shows that these are the other 2 major things that we think are driving the activity of the drug, but I've never told anybody, but I have the data. So what that allowed us to do was really have the confidence that the system is able to identify these things, because it's been validated in an unintentionally blind way by somebody who's been researching this for 20 years, has the data, but never really told anybody that those were some of the major biological drivers of why the drug works, and our system was able to pick that up. So I think those are 2 of my definitely my favorite outcomes of the past year.
Yeah, there's always a lot of value in outlier theory, right? And how AI can pick up outliers, and it's also the patterning recognition that you can get. And obviously, that was also an intuitive validation as well, which is just reinforces. That's one of the things that we've learned on the precision of AI models, that the human does have an intuition validation when you have the conversations. Yeah, and I love the Pepsi. I forgot about that. Yeah, and everybody still does A/B testing in marketing. We could talk about that a lot, and whether it's worthwhile or not. Now, you've got a lot on the go. As you look to this year, which is now underway, we're approaching, the end of our first quarter here shortly, but what will success for you look at the end of this year? Is it raising more financing? Is it, getting to a certain threshold in your financing structures? X number of customers, but anything you can share. But as you know, you'll hold yourself accountable for, Dave, and any shareholders might hold you accountable for.
Yeah. No, I think what we're really focused on is a few of the conversations that we've been having with the larger pharmaceutical companies. So we're working with some now, but it usually takes a while to get to know the organization, get to know where their priorities are, meet with the correct people to make sure that what we're working on and what we can provide is differentiated and actually creates value for the organization. Large pharmaceutical companies have a lot of resources, and they're oftentimes working on things internally that might have some overlap. And it's really just trying to solve that jigsaw puzzle: is where do we fit in? And that can often take a little bit of time. So there's some of these engagements that we've been working on with a few companies for a little while now. Some of them since last year, but they're starting to come to fruition. As early as just a few weeks ago here. So by the end of the year, we'd like to convert, some of the conversations that we're having with these companies into larger commercial engagements. And I think we're really well positioned to do so with actually some of the things that we talked about here today.
So Dave, one question I do have, and that's helpful, is are you, and when you look at your revenue structure, are you driving a software licensing fee plus a PS drag, or are you driving more professional services enablement, and then with those dollars reinvesting it into the product development? And I know there's synergy in those cycles, but I know the difference there in the valuation metrics. And but how are you, really positioning the company? Is it a software platform, or is it a PS commercialization consulting process? But just curious on the business model clarity.
No, that's actually a great question, because there's actually you could take either approach to all of this. So it's more of a, what do we think is going to be the most effective way to do so. So very directly, the generative piece of this is a seat license SaaS model. Um, we oftentimes, where the way that we typically work is we offer the base structure of it as it exists today, as a per seat license, and kind of we can discount that on volume of seats as appropriate for larger organizations. That one in particular, there's often an interest to create basically a private instance of that structure. Larger pharmaceutical companies have put a premium on privacy for obvious reasons when it comes to their IP. So there's often a structure where we will do that build, and that still has a license fee associated with it, but it's a kind of a different order of magnitude just because of the build time. And ultimately, those custom implementations, like having the model sit in the background to do the gap analysis, are still that same model, but just at a different scale. The clinical and biological side of things is much more of the professional services structure. It's often a longer engagement, simply because there's more data exchange, there's more time to do the characterization and those sorts of things. So that one in particular has the structure of larger fees, simply because of the value associated with the analysis. And sometimes it's a one-off engagement to do a single analysis, but we often structure it in a recurring manner. So it kind of is more of like a quarterly SaaS, where there's updates to the predictions and the analysis. That has more applications within the competitive intelligence and portfolio management sphere, as new information, new publications, new operational data comes to light. All of those predictions and metrics change. So you want to be privy to that, and that's something that can be repeatedly updated.
I said I really appreciate the diversification, but I'm sure as you continue the journey, the pressure points of, okay, where is the deep drill going? But you're still in this emergent discovery stage, and keeping a fairly federated approach, for a period, right? Now, a year is not that far away. If you're going to sum it up and say success would look like these three things or these two things, what would it be for you?
I think our biggest priority is we'd like to get two more partnerships on the side of our larger pharmaceutical companies. I think that's a major activity for us this year. we're looking forward to the partnership that we've been working on with the company that I mentioned, who's doing their announcement later this year. And that's something that will turn into a larger engagement that we'll be able to talk about later this year. Associated with that, we'd like to grow the team and scale the way that we're engaging the market. So once we're able to convert those opportunities, we will be looking at some larger fundraising as well. So that will be probably a latter half of the year activity. So that I would say if we're able to get all of that done within a calendar year, I would be ecstatic. I think we'd be in a great spot.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, well, I wish you the best of luck. I know those building blocks are like, and how and your point about the cycles being so long in pharma. So the fact that you're staying agile where there's heavily funded earlier startups that are into the drug discovery creates some additional validation while you work the larger accounts which are as you know, 18 to 24 months and sometimes 3 years, but you got to keep working, keep chipping away.
Yeah.
So as an entrepreneur, it's your first foray, I believe. I know you gave me some context on the lessons learned, but if there was just one lesson learned that you had as an entrepreneur that you wanted to pass on, what would it be at this point to other fellow CEOs?
I think it would have to be choose your team wisely. I think that it's critical in a large organization, but it can make or break a small one. You have to really, really know what your focus is in the short term and also what you're going to have to potentially deal with in the future. What I've found is that hiring a team that has diverse experiences with at least some overlap to the core tenets of the company, but trying to keep the rest of them a bit orthogonal has a lot of value because that way you're not subject to groupthink and reinforcing the same thought processes all the time. It allows for more creativity and perspective when solving problems. The other thing that I always try to look for, which is arguably the hardest thing to find, is high skill ceiling. How do you identify these people that when you bring them into the organization, maybe at some point they're creating some value, or early on maybe they're even struggling to do so. But for one reason or another, you either have a feeling or you have your own process of identifying it that these people will have a very high skill ceiling for the future, making them adaptable to the problems you don't even know that you have yet. That is incredibly important, very, very hard to do, but if you can do it, will really set you up for success in the future. So I think that that is probably one of the most important lessons that I've learned multiple times over in my career. So I always try to focus on that.
Yeah, Kleiner Perkins, all their research on what ventures were successful. Rule number 1, talent. Rule number 2, talent. Rule number 3, talent. So it's an important lesson. And you're right, at the early stages, it's keeping the glue and ensuring that the DNA and the molecules are flowing in multiple directions, right? So that the organism as a whole is getting stronger. Just to use your molecular context. I just want to
That's a
say
great way
thank
to
you
put it.
so much, Dave. I really appreciated the conversation. I've got a zillion questions, but I know we're out of time, so I'm going to pass things back to Jen to close us off.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, again for the pleasure and being able to chat together on AI. And thanks to our listeners for joining us for the Predictive World Series by SalesChoice. And I invite them again to join us at saleschoice.com/resources here, where we have a trove of AI thought leadership content across many years. Join us next time.